hopefully this will clarify for people. But comment saying Yusuf/Bigger syllogistic reasoning about what makes an Islamic building and what a builder's intended is not useful for understanding its structure. When dealing with early Umayyad structures, the sects of modern Islam make the mistake of imposing today's orthodoxy upon the past. You may do this in theology, but we try not to do this in history or art, architecture. Make distinctions. Islamic buildings have their own place in historical stream of ideas and must be understood in the context. Wait a minute. I don't... There seems to be something of a contradiction in there. Reasoning about what makes an Islamic building and what the builder's intended is not useful in understanding a structure. Skip to the last sentence. Islamic buildings have their own place in historical stream of ideas and must be understood in their context. Have their place in historical ideas and must be understood in context. Again, Islamic buildings have their place in the historical stream of ideas and must be understood in that context. Reasoning about what makes an Islamic building and what the builders intended is not useful for understanding a structure. Is it just me about that one? I think what me and Bigger are trying to do is understand it in its context, and that it's a Syriac reaction, or maybe an indigenous Syriac belief. As if you read the Church Fathers, you can see this, that these concerns were there long before we see the establishment of the Arabian calendar. If you look at the Achaemenids and the Ghassanids, this is where it's coming out of. And there was a comment earlier by the same individual that said you have to understand it in Islamic context. Well, of any existing Islamic context, no, because Sunni and Shia are modern, and it's debatable of what they believed, since they had crosses on their coins and images, which are anathema in Sunni. Maybe this is coming out of a defensive thing, but I kind of don't have that, since I was raised in Islam, and I don't have to keep dealing with Muslims as if they're children. I think that's wrong, but I'm not saying that this person is trying to do this, but I kind of see these ideas as being diametrically opposed, or these two statements being diametrically opposed. Trying to understand it in the time of when it was built, of iconoclasm, of debates about who Jesus was, and I don't think it exactly is adoptionism. I think there's a bunch of ideas working here, and we see some different schools. This is why all the early Nestorian writers at the time of the Arabian conquests, the Saracens, saw them as liberators. This could be because they said, we don't believe Jesus is the Son of God. Now, that was a very technical issue of Theotokos, of the Nestorians. That could have been seen as, oh, they're in agreement with us. You know, who is not against us is for us, who is not for us is against us, this kind of thing. But I think we are trying to work with it within the context of history. And I guess my confusion is that this commenter seems to initially say you have to understand it in the context of Islam, which I think me and Bigger would say what is said, what is used commonplace as the term Islam or Muslim did not exist at that time. Again, if there was this ravenous Sunni iconoclasm that was really as hard as it is today, why were those Buddha statues in Afghanistan? Why weren't they destroyed beforehand? They certainly had the means to destroy Buddha statues in Afghanistan. Why did it take all the way until the Taliban to destroy them. If that was actually being practiced, I mean, we see Muhammad Qasim in 7/11 attacking across the Indus, or at the Indus, and certainly within Afghanistan. These are known. I think if you look at Patricia Crone, who I don't particularly like, at least if you read what she says, it's not sustainable to say. I mean, well, I don't think it's sustainable to say both anyways, of saying, well, you have to look at an Islamic context and you can't, or that history doesn't try to understand things in its context and doesn't understand the intention of the builder. Certainly we have come to an understanding of why the pyramids were built, or trying to understand why was Stonehenge built. Is it a calendar? What is it for? This kind of stuff. That is the goal of history, is just to gain a deeper understanding. And essentially history is about people, not just there's a building here. I mean, that's really architecture of understanding. There's a building here. How is it built? We don't want to know why it was built or what it means. It seems that history does try to determine why it was built. What does it mean? And how is it seen throughout the ages? But I don't think Muslims were adoptionists really as a full thing, because adoptionists would say Christ is the adopted son, whereas a Muslim would reject that. But I think the idea is strangely close, just as we see in Byzantium, the argument between Monophysite and Chalcedonian is on a knife edge, and both sides can misunderstand each other, and third parties can misunderstand each other, who's who. Easily shown out by many of the videos I've done on Monophysites and Coptics and Chalcedonians, is that people are, well, wait, so they're the, it becomes this strange thing of, wait, this might be more semantics than anything. But I think if you look at the external sources of Islam, and as I tried to show in my video, Bigger Caroline Part 2, and I didn't upload Part 1, which probably would explain more, but that Muslims don't even, modern day Sunnism does not look at anything before 300 years after the start of the Islamic calendar. And generally Sunnis and Shia tend to look at the Umayyads as a apostate dynasty, when it seemed to have the most impact, and a lot of these things came up. What modern day Islam would turn into came up in the Umayyad dynasty, and maybe I certainly look at the Abbasids as maybe they're the corruptors, and there's been kind of a bamboozlement. But that's exactly what history tries to do, is figure out what is this in context to the historical times, and what did it mean, and why is it here, and what the importance has been, and why did this person build it. Just look at something like the cross in early Christianity, and how that was viewed in early times as then you get into Byzantine times and later, and kind of a modern day misunderstanding of it, instead of looking at it as a horrific tool of torture. But the understanding has changed, because that tool of torture then becomes, for the Christian, an instrument of liberation. So you do see where the pagan Romans had it as a thing of torture and disgrace, is now Christians say, well, we would not be crucified because that's too much of an honor, which would seem strange, but you have to understand it in the context. So I guess I'm kind of at a loss. It seems that we're in 100% agreement, but there's these statements at the beginning of these comments that preface it as, well, you're not in agreement and you're wrong, and then the rest of it is in total agreement with everything that I said. And this is what confuses me the most. This isn't the first time we've gotten in discussions like this, where the person will say, I disagree with you, and then state my whole case. And I don't know if it's an intentional, just trying to make arguments, but I would love to clear this up, because I think the three of us that are in this dialogue, it's very helpful, and I don't want semantics to get in the way, as it has gotten in the way in Byzantine and early Islam dialogues. Peace to you. And certainly I don't want to cause a fight or anything like that. That's not what I'm trying to do, or accuse people of anything. It's just how it seems to me, and I hope we can clear this up so we can get more to the meat of things.